परीक्षित भैया?
नमस्ते दीदी, नमस्ते, वेलकम। Good to see that many faculty and students are already joined in the session.
Yes, we can see so many of our friends who've already joined us. So maybe we can talk to some of them. Nice.
Yes, Didi, certainly.
We can talk to some of them. Maybe Anuradha ji, Dr. Sheikh. Mr. Rahul, would you like to share something? We can see some of the students. So, dear students, I think it would be wonderful if you could just introduce yourself and the colleges from where you are and how did you get to know about this session, or did you attend the eSIP that was held in the month of November? It would be nice to listen to you. Yes, Sumit. Sumit, you just unmuted, beta. Sumit Kumar Verma.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, beta. Would you like to share something? Sumit, please feel comfortable. So we have Arjun has already joined us. A very warm welcome to Arjun. Uh, and a very warm welcome to Priya ji. So Arjun, maybe we were trying to interact with some of the students who are there with us in this follow-up session. So we thought that maybe the students would like to put forward their views, or they just like to communicate with us. So we were trying to do that. So as we can see that we are going to discuss something on natural environment as a session 13 of our follow-up session. So Arjun, I hand over the forum to you so that we can talk about it and we can even interact with the students who are with us and the faculties alike.
Yes, definitely. So today we'll be talking about nature and how the humans are also a part of nature. Many times we have the misconception that humans are separate and nature is separate, but we'll just um, try to understand how all these things are linked to each other. So that's what we'll be discussing today. So in our usual discussion, which we're having every week, we are always coming back to the same point that we want to live in continuous happiness and prosperity, right? That's something which is common for everyone because it's our basic aspiration, and uh, everyone wants that same thing, right? So when we can see this, then we also see that what is our role in this whole society, what can we do, and what is happening in nature, and how is all of this linked to each other. That's what we want to see. And in the human being, are you able to see that um, if we are able to understand the harmony and live in harmony, then that's all that needs to be done, right? Or is there anything else? Because if we are able to understand and live in harmony with that right understanding, which we are talking about in every session, then we'll be happy also and prosperous also in continuity. So if we have these two things, then what else would be required? So that way we can just explore and see that in the human being, if we have these two things, continuous happiness and prosperity, then if nothing else is required, then that's all that we have to look towards. And for that, understanding and living in harmony is the only thing which we have to really look into through right understanding and right living. So when we come to nature, then we want to just check and like try to discover whether nature is also something where nature is in harmony or nature is in conflict. Like when there are natural calamities also, is it because nature is disorganized, or is it that nature is in harmony, and if we just leave it the way it is, then it will continue to be in harmony? So we can just take different opinions on this, and then we'll slowly uncover what we want to say. So if anyone has any kind of comment on this question, that is nature by way of harmony or is it by way of struggle, you can write in the chat also. Or if you want to share any comment or something, you can share. Maybe it is not so visible right now, but whatever you can see so far, you can just share your view. In the chat you can write, so then we can just discuss, because there may be lots of different assumptions about this and there may be lots of different opinions and ideas around it. So um, if you just write in the chat something else also, if you want to write, then you can write. And it may look like there are 2-3 things going on, like how we see that there are lots of theories also which are trying to say that nature is about survival of the fittest. Like there are so many theories of evolution and theories of the Darwin's theories, and there are even in thermodynamics there are theories that there is chaos, and like there are so many theories like that. So we just want to really try to understand it better so that it becomes more clear to everyone. So basically nature, when we talk about nature, it's a collection of units. And by units, we mean things like air, water, trees, soil, all these things are units, right? Different kinds of units. Some of them are, you know, these metals, some are non-metals, some are um, the bio order, some are animal order, and like that. We can just slowly classify them also once we can see that there are lots of different kinds of units. And when we talk about the finished products of what we are seeing, like phones and TVs and all that, they are just transformation of these kind of units into something else by different processes. But basically, nature is just a collection of units like this. So some of them are consciousness units and some of them are material units. Like the self, if we see, that's a consciousness unit, and the body is a material unit. Metals, soil, all these are material units. So there's a comment from Dr. Sunil sir, who is saying that the physical, bio, and animal order are in perfect harmony. Nothing needs to be done to establish the harmony of these orders. However, the human order is not in harmony. So that is a nice observation, and that is true also, because once we understand how to fit into this system in the right way, then we can also be in harmony. But without that understanding, we just try to do things without really being sensitive to how to fit into the system properly in such a way that we enrich the system. So without that understanding, we end up spoiling the system of what is already going on well. And therefore, lots of issues happen then in the nature also. So when we look at how we can classify these units, we can classify these units into 4 orders. One is the physical order, one is pranic order, one is animal order, and then next is human order. So these are um in these 4 kinds of orders we can classify every single unit of nature. So this is what we want to go into a little more in detail. That there's a relation between all these 4 orders, and sometimes it may look like some of the relations between some of the orders are clear and some are not. So that's what we are going to go through. That at the base, if we see what is our like, when we see even in our feelings and all that, when we see in what we discussed last time about trust and respect, then we saw that mutual fulfillment is our kind of goal, because that's what drives us to do something. Like if we have less understanding than the other, then we try to help the other, and if the other has more understanding, then we try to learn from the other. So in that way we can see that human beings can also be complementary. So in the same way, um, all the orders are also complementary to each other, and the main thing which is happening is mutual fulfillment. So every unit is enriched in this process of mutual fulfillment. So like when we look at the physical order, air, water, soil, all these kind of things, then they are enriching the pranic order, which is the plants, trees, um, all the things which are growing, like grass and herbs and all these things which are growing. So the physical order is enriching the pranic order, right? Can you see this, like how the air and water is enriching the pranic order? And can you see the other way around also, that the pranic order is also enriching the physical order? Somebody can give an example of how that's happening also. How is the pranic order enriching the physical order? So it's very simple, that it's just that the pranic order also decays, and in that decay, then you have um, the plants becoming soil again, and um, that process becomes cyclic also again. Like the plants are, um, you know, at some point they die, and then their decomposition enriches the soil. So like that, you can see there are so many ways in which the pranic order also enriches the physical order. And then we have this animal order, animals, birds, and all these um, different kinds of, all kinds of animals. We say reptiles, we say whatever, different kinds of animals, mammals, birds. So all these are part of the animal order. So the animal order is also dependent on the air, water, soil, right? Without that, the animal order will also not survive, because if there is no water, there's no air, then neither the pranic order nor the animal order will survive. So they are dependent on the physical order. And at the same time, we see that the animal order also enriches the soil, because you have this cow dung and you have all kinds of dung. Then you have the the birds, they transport the seeds. The bees also transport the nectar from one place to the other. And there are so many activities going on like that, where the animal order is enriching the pranic order, and that is in turn enriching the physical order. And sometimes the animal order directly enriches the physical order. So like that, we can see that they're all linked to each other, and all the three orders over here, we can see that they are interdependent and interconnected with each other. And we can also see that it's a cyclic process. It's not only a one-way process. So it's like whatever the animal order has, which can help the other orders, that is being transmitted. And whatever the physical order has, that is being used by the animal order, and so on. So like that, we can see that they are interconnected and interdependent on each other. And in this whole process, you can see that every unit is enriched. It's not that when the animal order is taking sunlight, then um, you know it's not like the sunlight gets depleted like that. It would be there, always there. So like that, when we see this, we can see that every unit is enriched in this process. And there is abundance of physical order and pranic order for animal order. You can see that also, right? That will be you can see that it's in abundance. Next, we'll talk about human order. So physical order, pranic order, and animal order are fulfilling for human order, right? You can see that they are interlinked and they are mutually fulfilling for each other for these orders when we see. But when we look at the human order, then what is the role of the human order in this coexistence, and what is it that is missing by which we are not able to fulfill this cycle? Like, without the right understanding, we can see that the human being is not able to enrich the other orders, although the human being is taking from all the orders. Like, human being is taking air, water, soil. Human being is taking the um, the vegetables and all. I mean, like, we are eating vegetarian food. If somebody is eating vegetarian food, then they're taking from the pranic order, right? They're taking the plants, trees, and all that. And similarly, if somebody is non-vegetarian, they're taking from the animal order. And even if they're not non-vegetarian, there are so many kinds of wools and cloths which are made from animals. There are so many products, animal products, even milk and all these things we are taking from cow milk and all that. So we are taking so many things from the animal order also, so many things from the pranic order also, so many things from the physical order also. But when it comes to the uh, contribution of the human order towards these other three orders, then without right understanding, there's no idea of what to do. And then the result is that the other orders are not being enriched by the human order. So the human order is kind of um, only taking from the other three orders, and that is a reason for why things can get depleted, because resources, when we see, they are um, limited only because of the fact that the human order is not making the right use of them and also not helping to enrich them. So here there is also a comment from Priya ma'am saying that, is increase in human population responsible for not being in harmony? So the increase of human population without right understanding, that is definitely responsible for a lot of problems. Most of the problems which we can see, like global warming and all these problems, whichever are visible in the nature, those are a result of the human order only taking from the other three orders and not playing its part on enriching the other three orders. So that's why a human being without right understanding is definitely contributing to the problem, because they're only consuming without giving back. So in the other three orders, there is a proper thing where each order is taking from one order and also giving something back to the other, or to the same order. So when you do that, then there's a scope for something to be cyclic and something to be continuous. But if you're only taking, then there's no scope for it to be cyclic. So one day it will happen that uh, you know the situation becomes worse, and slowly it keeps getting worse, and then at some point it becomes very bad. So this is what we can see, that without the right understanding, then the human being is contributing to a lot of problems. But with the right understanding, the human being can also be a part of this coexistence and contribute to the other three orders. So they can also take from the other three orders and also give to the other three orders. So we'll just see how we can do that. For some things, it is very obvious. Like when we talk about the pranic order, then the most obvious thing that may come to mind is to plant trees, right? That can be one thing. But when we go into more and more subtle things, then we can see that in our day-to-day life, whatever decisions we take, that also has a huge impact on the global, what we are doing in the society also. Like, for example, there are so many people who have stopped using plastic bags, and therefore it's a lifestyle decision kind of, where they've decided not to use plastic bags and to use something else like paper bags instead. And with paper bags also, paper is also coming from trees, right? So if you just plant trees, then what I'm saying is you just try to look at what we are consuming and try to give back more than what we are consuming. So if we are using paper bags also, which are coming from trees, then if we can plant more trees than that, then that's the minimum that we could do to help to contribute from our side for the other three orders. So we'll go through in this in more detail also. But can you see that um, the human order is not really fulfilling for any of the other three orders? There is another interesting, very true comment also that from Dr. Sunil, that there is abundance of resources in nature for all the four orders, including the human order, but accumulation of resources by certain human beings is the prime reason for fighting for physical facilities. And this is true notwithstanding the population explosion. So basically, I think he's saying that the accumulation of resources more than what is required for a human being, if they start accumulating, then it becomes less for the other, because one person it's like hoarding and taking more than what you need. Like in this COVID situation also, many people had this hoarding of oxygen cylinders, and then in the hospitals there were less oxygen cylinders, and people were keeping them at home even without having COVID, just because of the fear that if they get COVID then they might need it. And because of that, the people who actually had a problem were not able to have the oxygen cylinder. So like that's a current example which we can see, which just happened recently in this COVID situation. But if we see broadly also, we can see very clearly that there are so many people who are um, accumulating more than what they require, much more than what they require. And because of that, there is lack of proper distribution of the resources. So the resources, instead of going equally to different people, they're going, like a large percentage of resources is going to the same person, and then there are hundreds of people who are not getting enough. So that is lack of proper distribution. And why that is happening is because of lack of the right understanding about prosperity. Because if we don't know how much we need, then whatever we accumulate will never be enough. We'll always feel that if we have this one more thing, then it'll be okay. But then that never happens, because we're always in that kind of frame that we need one more thing to be happy, and then when we get that one thing, then again it's one more thing, and then again it's one more thing. So the lack of that right understanding of happiness and prosperity, that is the reason for this accumulation without without knowing why we're accumulating. We're just accumulating. And that is true, that is the reason for a lot of lack of resources also, which we are seeing as apparent lack of resources. But in the world, we can see that there is actually more than enough. The problem is in the distribution. Like, for example, even if you look at food, the food production is much more than what we require. If you see the overall food production, it can feed at least 2 or 3 times, or they say even 7 times as much as the population. But yet, when we see on the ground, we see that there's around 40% of the population which is going hungry. So, like that, this is only because the other 60% may be taking much more than what is required. And also because of the system that if you have money, you can afford everything and you can buy anything. So with that, sometimes you just buy anything without looking at the responsibility and looking at what are actual purposes of buying that thing. Like, just because we can construct a 10-story house because we have enough money for that doesn't mean that it is good for the environment if we are just two people living there. So these kind of decisions when we take, then they're largely based on trying to get happiness from that respect and all that, which is our false kind of belief that we'll get respect by doing something like that, or we'll get more status by doing something like that. These kind of assumptions may be there. So all this is stemming from the lack of right understanding, lack of putting things in perspective in the bigger picture. So what we are trying to say is that as human beings right now, we may not be mutually enriching for the other three orders, but we can look at what we can do to be mutually enriching, so that from our side at least we are contributing towards the solution and contributing towards this cyclic process of how all the other three orders are in proper harmony. We are already there in that process, but because of lack of right understanding, we are not doing what we are supposed to do. And if you look at our natural acceptance, it is very clear that we want to try to do the right thing. It's just that not only lack of understanding, lack of the idea of what to do and what we are like many times we don't even realize that when we take a simple decision in our day-to-day life, then it is either it's either contributing towards the harmony in the other three orders, or it is contributing to disharmony in the other three orders. So every decision we take in our day-to-day life also, that also has an impact on the other three orders. So when we start being sensitive to this, start looking at this a little bit closely, then our decisions can also change in such a way that we take better decisions, such that we don't have this conflict as much. Like the simple thing of veg versus non-veg also. And there are so many things which we do in our day-to-day life, so many decisions, like this plastic versus paper bag, or plastic versus cloth bag, and so on. So there are so many things. Like, you can even say, if you have an independent house, then whether you're doing rainwater harvesting, rainwater recharge or not, these are decisions which can be taken, whether you're using solar power or not, these kind of decisions. So there are so many things which you can do in your day-to-day life itself, which can towards the harmony. So with right understanding, the human beings can understand their role in this whole process, and then they can be mutual fulfillment, and human beings can be more fulfilling for all the four orders, including other human beings. Because right now the human being is many times in conflict with another human being. So there's not harmony. Harmony is not even there within the human order. When we see the animal order, then all the members of a species are in harmony. I mean, they are all like kind of coexisting and there's no conflict. But with human beings, we can't say that because there are so many human beings who are fighting with each other, right? Including us, we can say we might have conflicts with other people and so on. So human being, within the human order itself also there is disharmony, and there is also disharmony being created with the other three orders. So with right understanding we can work towards the mutual fulfillment. And when we look at this thing of how nature is designed and what is actually happening, then we can see the interdependence and how much interdependence is actually there. So many times we look at the human being as the supreme being because they are most evolved in terms of the self and the body. Like the human being has the most sophisticated kind of brain and most sophisticated kind of body. So sometimes because of that, we have the assumption that the human being is supreme and human being is better than the other three orders. But when we go for that mindset, then we also feel that we can control the other three and we can get what we want out of the other three. And while that looks possible when we look through the mind, it's not really possible because we are creating different levels of disharmony in all the other three orders. So whenever we do something with the other three orders which is not in harmony, then its effect will show at some point or the other. It may not be visible in the beginning, but its effect keeps building up, and eventually the effect becomes very drastic, which becomes very visible to everyone. So, although we think as the human being is the most supreme thing, we can also look at the fact that the human being is dependent on all the other three orders. If even one of these was not there, then everything would fall apart. Because suppose animal order is not there, then what will happen to animal order will not be enriched. What will happen to the physical order? So we can see that all the four orders when we look at, then in the bottom three, physical, pranic, and animal order, they can sustain themselves and have no problems. But human being is the only one who depends on all the other three orders, and human being is the only one who is in disharmony. So dependence of any order is on all the previous orders. So what that means is that the human order is dependent on all the other three orders. Pranic order is dependent only on the physical order. Animal order is dependent on pranic and physical order, and so on. So even though the dependence is only on the other orders which are below it, the interconnectedness is there, and the other orders always enrich. Like the physical order enriches the pranic order, and the pranic order also enriches the physical order. And the animal order also takes from the pranic order, physical order, and they also enrich the other two orders. So like that, you can see that the human being is only the odd one out because of this assumption that the human being is the most sophisticated and the best kind of thing, and that the other three can be controlled by the human being. That is a false assumption, which has been kind of looked at as something which is true, which is completely, I mean, not at all true, because the human being is completely dependent on the other three orders, and without any of them, the human being cannot survive. So if we are not really taking good care of the other three orders, then they will do more and more harm to the human order itself. Like, let's take an example of the pesticides and the genetic modified seeds. We can see like the kinds of vegetables that you would get in the market 10 years back versus now. you can see that right now you're getting bigger size vegetables which are genetically modified and which are with those seeds which are not as good as the seeds which were there in the past. And that is because the human being is feeling that they can control the other three, and they have designed something using the brain, and it feels as if that would work for the other. I mean, that the animal order and pranic order and everything can be controlled. But that is not controllable like that, because they are far superior actually. So the result is that humans are consuming these genetically modified items of food, and that is causing sickness in the human beings, that is causing so many of health issues and all that. So although it could be an assumption that the human being can control the other three, actually the fact is that the human being doesn't have that kind of capability. So the best thing that the human can do is to let the other three orders function the way they are functioning without disturbing them. And also, that would be the first step, and second step would be to try to see the role in how the human being can um, fit into this picture and be of good use to the other three also, instead of only taking from the other three and not trying to modify the other three, like trying to modify the seed or trying to modify the things in the nature, the plants and all that. That is not a good idea, because it will lead to health problems also within human beings and also disharmony within the nature. So you can see all these GM kind of genetically modified foods, they are causing more and more health problems. And then we have also made healthcare systems, but then the effect of them is poorer health, longer life but poorer health. So that's not what we want. We don't want a long life with poor health. So with all the scientific advancement and all that, we have gotten to a place where we can increase the longevity a lot with certain kinds of medicines and surgeries and all that. But at the same time, when we try to control everything, then sooner or later we have the impact of that coming back to the human being. So more and more, if we align with the nature, then our health will also be better, and our um, harmony in the nature will also be more easy to maintain. Right now, the harmony in the nature is also lost, and the health also is deteriorating. So this is what we can see right now. And within nature, everything is properly organized. So all we have to do is recognize the coexistence in nature and try to see that all the orders are mutually enriching each other, and we can also be mutually enriching for the other three orders and for the human order also. So let's just discuss a little bit about, there are so many problems which are visible in the nature, so we can just talk about them if we want to talk about, or else we can go ahead with looking at the relationship between the different orders. So before that, we can take any comments or questions in the discussion so far. You can switch on the mic and we can discuss. We can even discuss what kinds of things we can do from our side to try to contribute towards the harmony in nature. And now you can see that even human beings are a part of the nature, right? You can see that they're not separate from the nature, because we're all interconnected and we're all interdependent on all the other orders. And without any of the other orders, the human being cannot survive. Like in some research, they had said this also, that if the bees become extinct, then the whole uh, the whole human race can also get wiped out, because there is so much dependence on bees for certain things like the nectar and the transportation, and each activity is linked to the next activity, the next activity, and then there's such a long chain of activities before we even see anything happening in the human being. But that is the impact, that even these small things like bees also, there's so much of relevance on what they are doing in the what they are doing for this mutual enrichment, and the birds and everything. If we see, as more and more species get extinct, we realize that there are more and more things coming up, that these gaps coming up, that we didn't know that these problems would come, but then they've come. So there is also a comment that technology advancement and industrialization leads to damage or for surveying purpose. um, well, like, technology advancement is not really as much of an issue as the way the technology is being used. Because scientific advancement itself is not really an issue. Like when we look at things like the internet, things like any kind of technology, then it can either be used to for a good purpose, or it can be misused, right? So even this research about different kinds of seeds and the genetic modification and all this could be used for a experiment, but then we should also be able to see the fact that this can also do a lot of harm in the long run. Like there was a thing about wheat also, that wheat has been modified so much that it causes a lot of side effects now, and a lot of people have become gluten intolerant because of that. And people who are not gluten, who are able to eat gluten without any allergy, they are also getting gluten intolerance by eating the wheat now because of the modifications. So slowly different problems will keep cropping up um, as we make modifications which are not natural. So any technology when we use for something, you know, to try to bring back the harmony which is not there from our side to the other three orders. Whenever we use some technology for that, it would be mutually enriching for all the orders. But whenever we use a technology um, without understanding what it can do, what its impact can be, that can be very dangerous. Like this genetic modified seeds, most probably the people who made it were not aware of the problems that it could cause, or this genetic wheat and all that. So most probably the people who have made it intended to do the right thing, but then because of lack of understanding of this coexistence and how each thing is linked, because of not knowing that, there is a scope for a lot of mistakes and dangerous mistakes. So all we can say is that technology can be used to uh, for the other three orders and also the four orders, for trying to contribute to the harmony rather than doing it without any proper understanding of the impact. So Dr. Sunil is saying that what is required is right understanding and right feeling in the human beings to re-establish harmony among the human and other orders. However, the first three orders are already in coexistence. That is also a true fact, that we can see that, right? Naturally, we can, when we look at what is happening right now, we can see very clearly that the other three orders, when we don't disturb them, then they do very well. Like when you look at a forest, when you go to a forest, nobody has to plant seeds, nobody has to collect the dung, nobody has to do anything, right? Because that is a system which is running on its own. For years and years, it's running. When a tree dies of old age, it stops running. then you have more trees coming up, and like that you have such a natural, beautiful system which is already in place, which we don't have to do anything to, make it happen. All we have to do is not disturb it, that's all. So if there's a forest which is there, all we have to do is not disturb it. So that is all. I mean, we don't have to take any special care or anything. All we have to do is not disturb it, not try to cut some trees, not try to do some kind of thing where we are planting different trees there which are not in that not supposed to be planted in that place, and those kind of things when we start doing, then it disrupts the harmony. So there's a natural harmony in every system, like the ecosystem, what we call also, and the system by which the animals also give birth and they die. Everything is in perfect sync and perfect timing. But when we start eating animals, or when we start doing different things, giving different drugs to animals to try to increase the production of milk or production of meat or whatever we might be doing, when we do all such kind of things, then it creates a large kind of disconnect from what their role is in that coexistence. So when we give certain drugs to a cow also to make more milk, then the dung that it produces also will not be as good for the soil as it would be otherwise. So with that result, the soil is not going to get as enriched as it would otherwise. And because of that, then the trees which are growing in that soil will not be as kind of healthy. And because of that, then you need to use pesticide. And then when you use pesticide, then um, the soil becomes even less fertile, but then we're doing it because it looks like that is the only way. Of course, that's not the only way, but because of lack of the understanding of all these things and the impact of each activity on the other, because of that, we're taking a lot of bad decisions. And then those pesticides come into the food, and then we eat the food, and then that food causes us certain kinds of health problems, and so on. So I'm just trying to give a broad example where you can link all these activities and see that all of these are linked to each other and they're not separate from each other. So human beings are not separate from nature. Human beings are a part of nature and are totally dependent on nature also. So would anyone like to comment or share about this? Can we see the relation between different activities happening in the nature? Like in the plants, in the plant order, the animal order, are we able to see that all of these are linked to each other? Or do they look like they are separate from each other?
Yeah, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You're audible, sir. You may put forward
Yeah,
your
thank
views,
you.
please.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, as it is suggested or rather proposed, the first three orders are in coexistence, and we can see very well that the plants, the animals, as well as the physical order, they are perfectly in coexistence even without this understanding is not applicable to them even because self, in fact, the animals have self for sure, but in the sense that the human beings have self. So even without that, the animals are actually fighting against each other because only for physical necessities, for food, in fact. Even having the right understanding and right feeling, the animal order, the bio order, as well as the physical order, they are in perfect coexistence. And making a kind of harm. For example, if you look at the forest, there is no waste at all. Whereas wherever there is human habitat, the waste is produced as well as we do not know how to take care of the waste, how to handle the waste. We are speaking about so much of things like plastic waste, bio waste, other waste, etc. But say the other three orders, even though they are much bigger than us, the bio order, physical order, and the animal order, they are much bigger than us. But there is perfectly no waste produced. The bio waste produced will become enrichment for another order, the physical order, for example. This is perfectly okay. But I have to say, put forward one question. So whenever this is discussed in the Universal Human Value class meetings, and whenever the students are asked the question, like survival of fittest, that is a particular thing. So if it is existing between the human order, or if it is existing between the animal order, then the interesting comment which is coming is that students usually compare this with Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. So can we suggest, rather, can we put forward that example over here? This evolution is happening over, say, centuries. That is true. But when they put forward this kind of a suggestion that human beings, amongst human beings also, this survival of fittest is existing, then I say that for a given time, at a given point of time, you see what is happening in the physical, the bio, the animal, as well as the human order. So given that the facilities are available with the right knowledge, that the human beings, if they have the right knowledge, that the abundance of physical facilities are available for all of them, then there is no say purpose of any kind of wars, any kind of fights, any kind of quarrels in between for the physical facilities. Then I give the examples of like the Chennai flood, when the flood happened over there a few years before. Then even the millionaires, they were actually fighting for food, because money, the bank balance cannot serve you at that point of time. Whatever is dropped from the, say, helicopters at that time, the people were actually fighting for that. That is an example when we have limited. So at that time, the facilities were limited. The food packets were limited. So even the millionaires they have to fight for their bread at that time. Only simple example. And likewise, say in animals, it is happening because that is the role of the forest. The bigger animals are eating the smaller animals. That is the role of the forest. Whereas this, whenever the students say with regard to this Charles Darwin's theory, what kind of reply can we give, a response can we give to the students? That is my, say, a query. Can you throw some light upon this, please?
Sure, that's also a very interesting question. And the Darwin theory is about the struggle for the survival of the fittest. But when we look at the coexistence, then we see that different animals are designed in such a way that they are, there are different categories of animals in which the way based on the way that they've been designed and based on their capabilities. So broadly, when you see, then every animal has a self and a body. Like a human being has a self and a body. That way, an animal also has a self and a body. So the self has a very strong will to live. Can you hear me? I think the connection got disconnected.
Yeah, exactly. I'm hearing,
We can
listening
hear
very
you,
patiently.
Arjun. We can hear you.
Very good. Yes.
So the self has
Very
the
good.
will to
Please
live,
go ahead.
and
Yes.
that is what is why the animals run from an animal which is a predator, because they are able to sense that um, that for the other animal I might be food, and therefore I don't want to die and I want to uh, continue to live. So then they will just start running because they have that strong desire to live. So any animal or any human being has a very strong desire to live because they have a self. So that is one thing which can be seen. And second is that in the nature, there is a beautiful design of nature where there are different kinds of features given to different animals. Like when you look at the tiger, they have a kind of intestine and a kind of what do you call all their body is designed in such a way that they are designed to eat meat. And when you look at the herbivores, their intestine is also in a different design. They're totally designed differently, and their thing is to eat vegetarian. I mean, like not to eat meat, to eat grass and all that. So in the nature, this design has been made keeping in mind the coexistence, keeping the coexistence as the foundation. They've made this system. I mean, like it's there. The system is there like this, so that everything has enough for every other order. And when you look at it from a scientific point of view, it might look like it is a survival of the fittest. But actually, what it is, um, you know, it's like how you have trees. Trees also at some point they will decay and then new trees will come. Like how you have a forest, right? Forest example which we just shared. So in the forest also, there'll be so many trees which are not able to survive, and then they die early. And then there'll be some trees which become very tall trees, right? So that is not the survival of the fittest, but that is the kind of the best for that situation, which has been designed in nature automatically. And like these lions and all have very sharp teeth and all that, and they have that instinct of the killer instinct kind of. So their self has the will to live, and their natural characteristic, every animal has a natural characteristic. Like some are very kind of animals which are very ferocious, like lion is a ferocious animal. Then you also have animals which are not ferocious, like you have these
Deer,
like you
like
have
a deer, na?
hmm? Like deer, yeah, like deer. Deer is not as ferocious as the lion. So their temperament is also designed like that. So everything has already been designed in nature to maintain the coexistence. So when we're trying to maintain the coexistence, then if it has to be cyclic, then it has to be that some animal dies and some animal gives birth, and that cycle has to be there. Otherwise, if if nothing is there to kill the deer, then the deer will multiply so much that you'll have so many deer, and there will be too many deer, and uh, too many will happen, right? Too many of the same species can generate, can keep reproducing, and they will keep multiplying, and then there'll be too much of that species. So the deer has a
That is very
certain
much true.
purpose
Very
in
much
the
true.
like
Even
like you see, the deer has a certain purpose in that coexistence. They have to fulfill that purpose, but you don't need extra of them. You don't need less of them. You need only that much. How much you need. So similarly with the
Yes,
tiger also,
yes. Very right, Arjun. And
because
even
the population of the tiger will be much less than the population of the deer. Because if the population of tiger was more, then the deer would become extinct. But that doesn't happen in nature. Everything is designed such that there is enough of each species. Exactly how much you need. So
very right.
that is about how nature is designed. So we can only appreciate the beauty with which it's designed. We can't really understand this in a logic because we cannot understand it. It's something which is just there. So when we are explaining it also to the students, you can mention that it is designed for
sure.
coexistence, and
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
because of
this
that,
is
this whole
explained
process
only
is
in this fashion only. So the extinction of the species is not happening because of this for sure, because there is say this fighting happening for food, as per the animal order. None of the species is getting extinct. But at the same time, when there is human intervention, this is happening. Some species become extinct because of human actions also. That is also being explained. But at the same time, when they talk about this Charles Darwin's theory, that is the point where, this is actually happening. I tell them that the Charles Darwin's theory of evolution is happening not is instantaneously. It is happening over, say, a period of time. And that is not what is intended, or that is not what is being discussed in this particular UHV program. Rather, at a given time, for a given time, if the resources is available for all the four orders, then there is no requirement of fighting between any of the species, including the human, any of the orders, including the human orders. That is the point which I would like to.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, basically, like in the animal order, their thing is not really fighting. Actually, that is their natural instinct.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
like
Yes,
how we
that's
have
it.
natural acceptance, right? You can see our natural acceptance is the same for all the human beings. Natural acceptance is different from the natural instinct, but I'm just giving an example. So, the natural instinct of a deer is not to eat meat, and the natural instinct of a tiger is to eat meat, and therefore they take those decisions and they do that. But it's not really to
Right.
for any other purpose. It's just the way that they are designed. As a species, they're designed like that. So it's not
Yes.
um, for any other reason. It's only for that. And of course, in this process, there'll always be, if some process like this has to be cyclic, then there has to be the other part of it also. Like even human beings, we have birth and death. We don't have only birth. In human beings also, if we had only birth and no death, then it would be not cyclic, because then you're not coming back. So you have like you can see that all these processes are cyclic and mutually dependent on each other, mutually enriching. So when the lion eats the deer, then I mean the lion is also doing something in the coexistence, something they're contributing to the other three orders. So every in the animals and all that, maybe whoever is not contributing to the other orders becomes extinct also naturally. So we don't know exactly about that, but we can just, like with inference, we can maybe say that, but we are not sure of that. But basically, we can just see that the whole process in nature is designed for coexistence. And therefore, different animals have different kinds of natural characteristics. So that's why they operate like that. And about the situation which you had shared about the flood situation, there also you can take it in two ways. One is that when you're looking with the perception that there is a limited amount of food and there are so many people looking for it, then there's a tendency to fight. But if you're, say, you're related to those people, you feel related to those people, then what you end up doing is you try to find a method such that you can divide it in such a way that everybody gets how much they need in whatever, I mean, like even if there's not enough, then you get to split it in the best way possible, rather than trying to snatch and trying to get more from the other, that kind of thing. So that happens with the feeling of relationship. So like you can assume that if it was your family members, then you would not fight for that food package coming. You would rather just see who is how hungry and then just decide and then split. Even if it is just a little bit of food, then you can still split it in such a way that you feel that you split it the right way and you're happy with that decision. So that happens only when you feel the feeling of relationship. If there's a feeling that there is not enough and we are not related to each other, then obviously there is a tendency to try to snatch. So these are two different things. One is about the Darwin theory, and one of them is about this feeling of deprived. So there can be many situations like where you have less quantity of physical facility, but even then, if you are having a feeling of relationship with the others, then you are able to see the situation in a totally different way, rather than if you are seeing it as somebody who is trying to take and everybody's trying to take, so then you end up snatching. So that is a different way of looking. Yeah. So I think it's time also. So shall we close now? I think.
Yes, Arjunji. It's already time. So thank you for the interactive session and putting forward the proposal for us to explore. And we'll meet again for another follow-up session on Friday on health, universal in health, and then on next Wednesday for this universal human value follow-up session. Thank you all the participants and all the panel members, and a special thank to our resource person for the evening, Arjunji. Ji Manisha Didi.
Yes, Bhaiya,
Yes.
that's very nice. It was a good and it was a really wonderful session. I could and interactive too. So it's nice that and we must thank Arjun Bhaiya also. He's helping the students develop, and of course, and faculties alike develop a lot of understanding regarding many of these subtle points where the proposal sharing is concerned. Thank you so much for being a part of this meeting. So thank you all. We'll meet again next Wednesday to discuss more. Arjun will continue with the harmony in nature itself.
We'll see. I'm not sure.
Yes, rightly said. So we'll be taking up some of the aspects of universal human values. And on Friday, we'll be having a session on holistic health. So please do join in then also. So namaste, and we'll meet again next Wednesday.
Yes.
Thank you.